I have enjoyed studying the people of the Bible, and I hope I picked the right ones that help you to find things out, figure things out in your own life, to inspire you to walk the walk and talk the talk and walk the talk. This is so important. It's like, what will our faith mean if it isn't that? If we aren't trying to be salt and light to this world, then what are we doing here? Amen? Joseph is one of my favorite people in the Bible. Now, I'll tell you what, I don't think he didn't have flaws, and I never thought about him too much until this week when I looked at his life and read some of his story. And like I've told you before, when you risk something, when you preach from somebody in the Old Testament and their story goes over several chapters, it's hard to condense it without looking choppy and tell what you want to tell us, the story for the day. But I realized Joseph was a cocky teenager. I thought he was all spiritual the whole way, and it would seem so. But reading what other ministers have studied and written, and looking at their notes and so forth, I realized that maybe one of the things I missed was the fact that when he's telling his brothers about the dreams he had where they're all going to bow down to him, it wasn't all meant necessarily a young man who was just trying to be spiritual, but he was putting it in their faces just a little bit. And why not? He's 14, 15, 16 years old. He hasn't learned everything. He's not that mature yet. He's still learning. But he's chosen by God to do many things that are marvelous. And as an adult, as he grows and learns and grows in full stature with the Lord and the way he does, I realize there's so much about him that I would like in my life at all times. And the big deal today for us is this. I want to talk about Joseph's integrity. Integrity can be forgotten. It can be overlooked. We can assume we have it and we really don't. We have to know that we're God's person, the same in private as we are in public. The same person in all things. I'll get to that as we go along here. You know, it was interesting. I was reading a story someone had shared about scientists now say that a series of slits, think of slits, not a giant gash, sank the Titanic. Now, all these years I've always been told that they hit the iceberg, there's a big hole, and the water flooded so fast. Maybe not so compared to what they found out. The opulent 900-foot cruise ship sank in 1912 on its very first voyage from England to New York. 1,500 people died in the worst maritime disaster of the time. The most widely held theory was that the ship hit an iceberg, which opened a huge gash inside the liner, as I've said. But an international team of divers and scientists in the 1990s recently used sound waves to probe the wreckage real closely, to go down where we couldn't go before, to the depths of the ocean. Buried in the mud under 2.5 miles of water they went. Their discovery, the damage was surprisingly small. Instead of the huge gash, they found 6 relatively narrow slits across the 6 watertight holes. The quality and the workmanship of the material was not quite what it should have been. And the iceberg evidently just put it over the edge and added that extra pressure to cause it to split up. Here's what I'm saying this for. Small damage, invisible to most, which this was, can sink not only a great ship, but a great reputation. They said this was the unsinkable ship, right? It was a ship of all ships, the mother of all ships, you might as well say. And she was the best ship of all time. There were going to be more built like her. But it wasn't the big gash so much as it was the small holes in her side that caused her demise. Joseph's life began with an unhealthy favoritism from his father. His father loved him and adored him over all his other children. He was a teenager with a fancy coat his father gave him. The others didn't get coats like this. He openly shared his dreams with his brothers and greatness about his role yielding, and that they would yield to him. His brothers despised him for it. They hated him enough that most of them would have killed him. Remember, these are sons from 4 different women. They're all full-blooded, all exactly in love with each other as they probably should have been. Only his older brothers, Reuben and Judah, would interfere and change the punishment to sell him into slavery so he wouldn't have to die. And so he was. He's purchased by Potiphar, who was captain of Pharaoh's guard. We don't know how long he's there, but he serves well, thus distinguishing himself as a man of integrity. Joseph could not change his circumstances, my friends, in his life. What hand he was dealt in life, whatever he got, whatever came his way, good or bad. He could choose to be the kind of man he wanted to be, but not the circumstances and conditions at all times. He chose a path. He chose to be a man of integrity in all circumstances. Look with me, it's chapter 39, the whole chapter. Bear with me as we read this story of Potiphar's wife. This is just one of the many stories we could have used, but this one stands out at me the most. But hear this story. This is real history. This really happened. It's not a fable. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So he left in Joseph's care everything he had. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her, even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until the master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave who brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, 'This is how your slave had treated me.' He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in that prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did." 4 times in chapter 39, we hear those words, "The Lord was with Joseph." One time we hear that he blessed Potiphar's house because of Joseph. The warden could trust him, a warden with a prisoner. Potiphar, an Egyptian hierarchy type person, could trust him with his household and everything. And you'll notice, in most cases, this man would have been put to death to mess with someone's wife that was this high up. So something about Potiphar said this is not what he wished to do with him, because he had a heart for him in one way or another, had him put in prison instead. Joseph, in all circumstances, when his brothers sold him, and when you know the Ishmaelites, the other son of the two, Isaac and Ishmael, his people are the ones to pick him up and take him and sell him into slavery. And Joseph realized he couldn't change his circumstances at any moment, but he could choose what kind of man he would be in those circumstances. You hear me? Now, when I start to think of all the stories in the Bible of people in slavery, and there's nothing, I don't see anything good about slavery. I don't like it. I don't understand how one man thinks they have a right to keep a person against their will, doing things for them, when they should live in their own life freely. I'll never understand how that ever happened in the history of this world, how people could do such a thing to other people. It makes no sense. Yet, I'm really confused by God. God has allowed it so many times in history. He even allowed the Hebrew people to be put into slavery more than once. The Assyrians did it. The Babylonians, other captors, the Romans enslaved people and made them house servants. Time and time again. And Paul even teaches that you are to be good when you're a slave, be a good one. I'm just paraphrasing how he says it, but he's telling him to honor those in authority over him. I think this is amazing. This whole thing just floors me. But then it dawns on me, God called us not to get a good, great life that's always perfect, nothing ever goes wrong, or we don't ever have trouble, but to live a wholesome, healthy life with Him, to walk in light with Him, fellowship with Him, and get ready for the day when He takes us home to be with Him forever. So there are going to be circumstances out of our control, and God's going to allow them in His permissive will to take place, that we're going to despise ourselves and not understand why they happen at all. Potiphar's wife, why did she move on? The question would have to be asked. He said no how many times? He must have been that handsome. We're talking young Tom Selleck. That please you, ladies? My wife thinks Sean Connery is handsome as old as he is. I don't get it. But this guy was the guy of that time who was like the people we think are good looking today. He was everything. Had the body, had the looks, had the intelligence, had the ability. Every woman wants a man in her life to have all these things, and she sometimes has to settle for a few less. But if love's real, it doesn't matter. But here's a Joseph. He knows what he is, what he's got. He's very aware of who she is and what she's trying to do. And we even see in Scripture where he tried to stay away from her. He did everything to be the right guy for Potiphar's household. He stayed away from her the best he knew how. Wouldn't be around her until this one day when it happened anyway. And when you know the one time she can get him alone, his life's changed for a while at least. But maybe not so much. He chose to be a man of integrity. So first this morning I said this to you, based on verses 1 through 6b. I call it B because the first sentence is A. A person of integrity, and I'm talking like Joseph, can be trusted. If you have integrity, this is how you know you have integrity. People can trust you. They can know that your word means something, that your actions will follow through with your word. And when we're weak at this, we don't have so much integrity as we might think. Just because you don't hurt somebody or do something terribly wrong doesn't mean your word still doesn't count for something, right? So here's the thing. We look at Joseph, and I learned 3 things about him about being trusted. First of all, in these verses 1 through 6, I see this about him. He keeps his word. And people of integrity keep their word. Now hear me on this. If you say you're going to do something, be there and do it. Time and time again, not once in a while. Do it all the time. If you want to be a person of integrity, then make sure your word means something when you give it. If you're going to babysit somebody, don't just not show up or call at the last minute and say, oh, I got other plans, I can't do it, I'm really sorry. Your word's no good. You're out of town company. I'm going to tell you something. A Christian worships God. I know some people have not always done this that way. I've tried to live up to this my best I know how. I think I've done it. If I have people come in to surprise me on a weekend, I tell them Sunday morning I'll be at church, you can go with me, but I'll have to leave you here otherwise. Because my word to God was I would worship Him with the rest of my life, with all my heart, all my soul, and all my strength. My integrity to God says I will worship Him, and others will not get in the way of that, because I love Him. When you love Him the most, then you'll love your family better, and your extended family the same. But I believe a person of integrity can be trusted to keep their word. God, I will worship you when others fail, when others fall away. Joseph had the Lord on his mind in every decision he made. He practiced the presence of God every day. It's an everyday thing, after all. If you're walking with God, you're walking with Him every day. And He sees everything you do. These people that keep their word, they also don't have to be checked up on. We see this about Potiphar and how he felt about Joseph. And the same thing with the guard, with the man who was in charge of the jail for Joseph. With Joseph in charge, they didn't have to worry about anything, is the gist of it. He's a prisoner in both cases. He is put against his will in jail, and he's serving another man against his will. But he knows he serves a God who's greater, and God's going to somehow make this right in His time and His way. And he doesn't know how or when. They don't have to go be checked on, people with integrity. Remember Paul and Silas in jail, what they did? Instead of whining about their situation, they had a praise service. I believe the jailer was their captive. And so was everybody else on shifts. They were hearing him sing to God in jail, and they were looking through the window in amazement. He should be upset, feeling miserable, throwing his food against the wall, not eating. Paul and Silas took their nourishment. Praise God. Joseph, he took what came here. He knew he was God's, and God would see him through somehow. But like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who said, even if he does it, we will not bow to you. Remember when they said that to their King Nebuchadnezzar about all his graven images and so forth? These people throughout history have taught us something about integrity. God is always God, so I must always be His man or His woman. He never compromised His integrity for me. And yes, He's God, and I'm a human, and I'm created, and I can fall in sin. But the attitude will be, I'm going to live my life every day remembering whose I am. They don't have to be checked up on. Joseph didn't, and neither will we if we are people of integrity. People will know they can count on us. Someone can give you a task to do and go off and leave you, knowing it'll get done. I know a young man who's a Christian. He was 18. He was hired by a Ford Motor Company. And they would give him jobs to do. And he would go over what the norm was to appoint people with white coats and stopwatches and clipboards would come in and find out how is he doing this job so much faster and better than people before him who did another standard. He was raising the standard of the jobs he took, one after the other, to the point they actually came to him and said, you need to slow down. Union rules say we only do so much of this work at a time. But he thought he was there to work and earn a paycheck. And he watched other young men and older men have people clock them out early so they could go farm or do whatever they were doing. They don't have to be checked up on, people with integrity. They're trusted. And this means when they give their word, the people who hear it know that it's good. Joseph was that person. And so can we be if we keep our word. When you tell your children they don't have to worry on your watch as a parent, you're going to take care of their needs. You put their needs before your own, don't you? Ask any mother, usually the fathers too. They make sure they get what they need in life. And I hope sometimes they say no to the things they just want, they can't necessarily have. Because that's a good lesson too. To husbands and wives, you don't have to worry being married to me. I will honor you, like I promised you in our wedding day for the rest of my life. Now, friends, I'm going to tell you something right here at this point. We've got to stop. You can lose integrity and get it back. It just is something you decide on a certain day. From this point forward, my word's going to mean something. I'm going to be trusted. I failed along the way in the past, but no more. God has forgiven me. I've given Him my life. And He's taken those things away. And now I'm going to listen to Him more than I ever did. So it's not hopeless if you failed Him along the way. And some people think that. And they give up. They say, what's the use? I keep failing when I try. That's not integrity. Keeping on is integrity. Keep trying. Keep seeking. People who can be trusted, my friends, when you say they're a breath of fresh air. Now, even Lynn and I have had conversations over the years of our lives in ministry, everywhere we've been. And one of us would say, well, so-and-so said they'd do this on Tuesday. And the other one would say, well, they always keep their word, so we know it'll get done. And I'll be honest, there have been others where she and I have said, well, somebody said they'd do this in about a week. I'll say, we better check back up on that one again later on, because we'll know they mean to do well, but they don't follow through. I'm saying this as a personal message because we all need this today. The world is waiting to see if what we have is real. Our integrity helps define that. Being the same person out there and in private as you are in church and in front of church people is integrity. Being the same person at all times. It's who you are. Verses 6c through verse 10 give us something else about Joseph that should be ours too. And that's this. A person of integrity will resist temptations when they come in your life. They will resist. They know their boundaries. Joseph knew his boundaries. He knew how far he could go. He said very clearly to Potiphar's wife, your husband gives me charge of all things. I can go anywhere, come and go as I please, but you're off limits. And that's all I need to know is what he's basically saying. You're off limits. So they know their boundaries when they resist temptation. Also, they consider the consequences to their behavior beforehand. Somewhere in his young life, Joseph decided that he had to give himself totally over to the Lord. And that's what we do. Somewhere in life, we finally decide, Lord, if I'm going to be a Christian, if I'm going to wear your name, then I have to give myself over to you. I have to resist temptations that come my way. I have to say no to those things that war with my soul and keep me from having that perfect fellowship with you. So you know your boundaries, you know the consequences of your behavior beforehand. You know what's going to do. You can look ahead and say, here's the damage I will cause. If I make this decision or this one, here's the damage I will cause to myself or to others. Here are the people I will hurt. Think about that. That person loves people so much in their integrity of life and their walk. They're already thinking ahead of time. How will I hurt this person or this person? How will I hurt the church by my witness? Anything at all, if I allow this to happen. If you think ahead of time, quite often it helps you resist. You slow down. If you saw the movie Fireproof, what did the young man finally do when he knew he had to get away from pornography and watching porn? He took his computer outside, remember? Put it out when they put it on the trash cans or something like that, took a ball bat and beat it to smithereens while his older neighbors would watch thinking he was a very strange person. But he did. And remember the other part of the story about the hospital bed for his wife who was angry with him and stayed angry with him, wasn't sure she loved him anymore, and she wasn't going to hang on to their marriage much longer. She was even considering the idea of having an affair with the doctor, and she thought the doctor had something going, and he kept hanging on because he realized when he was getting integrity in his life, he realized he had no himself captive to blame. He knew it was his fault. He didn't blame his wife as much as he did himself. And he started doing this 40 days, as the story goes and the book goes. And he made a journey back to being a man of integrity. Now you see how that word integrity becomes so important. Because it guides and rules our everyday thoughts. It keeps us in faith. It keeps us looking to God instead of ourselves. You've got to consider those boundaries. You've got to realize others may get hurt as a result of our yielding to temptation. And also, when we talk about resisting temptation, the person like Joseph, and they know that yielding to temptation ultimately offends God. That could have been number one, I guess. But I saved it for last because it has an impact on me, doesn't it, you? Ultimately, if I yield to temptation, I offend the God of heaven. That's what makes sin sin. Because sin offends him. A person of integrity will resist temptation. Then we go on based on Joseph's life in verses 11 through 20a, and we see that a person of integrity will withstand false accusations. You get blamed for things. You'll be accused. That happens to all of us. Your own family's done it at times. Who took the last cookie? You ever hear that when you're growing up? You bake cookies one day, and one of the brothers gets in there and starts eating the chocolate chips out of the freezer. They're supposed to be in the chocolate chips batch. My brother did this once. It cracked me up. My parents just had this thing where they'd line us all up and say, okay, if I don't find out who did this, you're all in trouble. Which made us resent each other more. We didn't look out for each other. We looked out for ourselves. We're young little boys. 4 of us. And my brother Mike finally admitted he'd taken them, which made us like him a little bit better. But the funny thing was, the rest of his life as a child, if the chips were missing, she assumed he took them every time. And then when he really didn't, he had to take her disbelief until he'd earned the right for her to trust him again. And it took time. My friends, when you lose trust, it takes a long time to get it back. Would you agree? It doesn't mean we don't want to trust you or trust each other or want to be trusted by you. It simply means a lot of good deeds will have to take place to convince us that you have changed. This is why that one time we fail hurts so badly. One time of letting people down, and they'll watch you from then on. You might be labeled or marked as somebody who can't be trusted for a long time to come, until someone sees you can be. That's the danger of that. So false accusations, this is why a person of integrity knows they've got to live that truthful life. They've got to live up to what Christ called them to be. They already know God knows who they are and what they do always. And they answer to Him. We understand that in every circumstance, I'm going to have to answer to Him, not to man. And He'll make it all right, but I've got to be true to Him. And this is why Joseph was able to go into this jail in such a timid, quiet way as he did. And he helped the jailer, the chief guy in charge there, to make the prison the best it could be. Their good name will also withstand the lies of time. And if people lie about you in time, people will learn that it's not true. We've seen this bear out on TV in some situations with some false accusations and hoaxes. This young man with the hoax in Chicago, how much of his life will he now have to pay to prove he's trustworthy again? Our good name should matter to us at all times. A Christian needs to have a good name. Would you agree? If we're going to witness for Him, it's got to be real, believable, something somebody else would want. So their good name will withstand the lies in time, but they must continue to be the same person in front of others that they claim to be. And Joseph was the same person in prison as he was in Potiphar's house, as he was back home, as he was anywhere in life. That's what makes him so amazing. He was able to live that way. They will prove themselves to be innocent 2 ways. A person who's been lied against, found guilty. Here's how it will happen. First, by continuing to act honestly in all situations, you'll prove yourself. Be honest. Be straightforward. Make your word your word. And continue to live. And then the other thing would be by recognizing that you're already forgiven and you're covered by the blood of the Lamb. No matter what others may think or say, that's sufficient. He will see you through when others won't believe you. Until the day comes when they realize He's always had His control over you. Or at least when it counted the most. You know, God can think about this. He allowed slavery, not necessarily approved it. Allowed Hebrews to be captured and treated poorly at times. Sometimes it was for their own judgment because they forgot who He was. This wasn't the case with Joseph, of course. But Joseph, you would think, well, he did nothing wrong. Why do you have to suffer in such a way? And that's hard to answer. It's hard to say, why do good people suffer? That's a question everybody asks. Why do good people suffer if God's such a good God and He protects us? Then why do people who are supposed to be protected get hurt? And all I can tell you is we're part of a fallen world where people who do evil can hurt innocent people. Some circumstances are out of our control. And that's all we need to know. We're part of a fallen world. That's the bottom line. Eden was perfect until man corrupted it. We won't be allowed to corrupt heaven. That's the good news awaiting us. The last sentence story about Joseph is this I would want to say. Based on verses 20b through 23, a person of integrity will find that the Lord is with him. That's the great news. This is good news. 4 times it said the Lord was with him. Why would the Lord be with somebody who's getting hurt all the time? How could anybody think that? If you tell the world that, they'll think you're nuts. Yeah, your God's done really good by you. Look what you're going through. You're going to lose your house. You lost your job. You're out of a relationship that you thought was safe and trusting. A person with integrity will find the Lord is with them even in these circumstances, even when things are rough. Even in tough situations, the Lord is with us. Verse 2, there is prosperity as God deals it out and enforces it. I learned that from that. Verse 3, there is success that others will witness because God is with us. They'll see it in our lives. The greater good is to see more people come to Christ, not accumulate so many things that you're the most revered person in town or most respected. That's the idea that we have. That wasn't God's intention. Verse 5, others get the blessing around us because we serve well. Potiphar was blessed because Joseph pleased the Lord, and Joseph was taking care of Potiphar's business. So other people get blessed, and so will your employer. Even if they're mean to you at times or make demands you think are outrageous. They want to tell you Saturday morning, they want to report on their desk by Monday. And you have to spend your weekend doing it instead of enjoying yourself being off. Or things like that. Even in tough situations, the Lord is with us. Others will get the blessing when we serve well, and that's not a bad thing at all. Verse 20b, people who are faithful to God know He is with them even in dire situations. You just know. You can sense His presence, and you have a peace about you. That's what it is. You have a sense about you that I'm going to go through a tough time, but the Lord is with me. Check the Psalm 23 out again and read what it says there. Even though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. This is a guy who ought to know. Verse 23, others do not second guess or concern themselves with your performance or behavior when you are a person of integrity. Even your enemies will start to like you. A person of integrity will find the Lord is with them, and that's how He does it, in all those ways I just mentioned. Kind of fast, I realize. You got verse 2, 3, 5, 20, and 23 to look at to show you different things in Joseph's life that said God was with him. So how do we know today, let's apply this, how do we know today that God is with us? That's what someone's going to ask me when I leave here this morning. How do you know God's with you then today? Well, this was special. There were miracles back in those days. These guys actually heard the audible voice of God. We don't get to do that. Here's one way. Through His Word. Why do we think His Word came at a certain time in history? It was written down by 40 plus authors on different continents, in different days. Some centuries were different. And it's consistent. Is there any? And it's withstood the test of time. There's nothing there are more copies of through ancient history than the Bible. Shakespeare comes the next closest. Beowulf. That's about it. Through His Word. 2 Timothy 3:16 says that all Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in every righteousness. Here's the last part of the sentence. The word so's there. So that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. That's one of the ways I will know God is with me. Because His Word promised it. He's always kept His Word. Throughout history, if you don't know much about Him, if a person outside of Christianity doesn't know much about Him, check out the historical facts and the way He planned them, set them up, and kept His Word. Then another way would be this, that we can know. Through all creation. That's a big one. Romans 1:20 says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. But here's the part that's hard. It ends by saying, so that men are without excuse. It will not matter if a person lives their whole life and doesn't give their life to Christ at some point along the way. They're going to find out who He is in a sad way. But in Romans, when Paul writes this to the Roman church, to the pagans of the world, the people who influence all kinds of heathenism, He says very boldly and plainly to them, knowing the Romans will be the ones that will kill him eventually. Men are without excuse. Because in creation, you can know there was a God. And you know, I get to think, if I look at the cycle of water, how the sun rises and sets consistently, the miracle of birth, how we can look at each other and understand each other. And so many other things that are listed. How the seeds in the earth, the Native Americans say that the earth is pregnant with seed. You can put your hand in the dirt anywhere and find seeds that haven't come up yet. How can all this minute detail happen? How can all these stars set up, these planets? How can man think and be so intelligent about some things, so stupid about others? Because we have the ability and the will to think and reason. Through all creation. Though the intricate details and magnificent beauty of all that God has made, through all of this, we can hear His voice. By studying the heavens, we understand more of God's greatness. My goodness, Neil Armstrong said it all, didn't he? Read some of his writings about what he felt about creation and God when he was looking at the moon and walking on it and seeing the earth from above. He knew where it came from, where all this came from. We see God speak in the birth of a child, the rising and setting of the sun. The sun's just the right distance so that we don't burn up. It's not too far away so that we freeze, or too close that we fry. The cycle of water, I've said, the ability of a seed to turn into a healthy plant. Rotting tree bark and branches turned into soil so that we can plant crops. Leaves of green in spring turning to brown and falling off in the autumn to make way for the old. And then the new comes again in the next spring. Why does it consistently keep happening if somebody supreme out there could have set it into motion? Then we will know that God is with us another way, through other people. God may use a friend, a teacher, a parent, or a warning, a blessing, or remind us of common sense truth about our lives. If their words line up with Scripture when someone's speaking to us, you might hear a sermon Sunday that you were just looking for that day, or you were just thinking about that week, and you wondered how that happened. Don't assume that I planned it. But maybe it was the right time in your life that God brought it to you to hear Him speak to you and help you with the trouble you're in. The teacher the same way, or the Christian brother who happens to show up at your house and you didn't know they were coming. If their words line up with Scripture when they share with you, if their thoughts, their actions seem to be God-like, don't question or wonder. God affirms His truth in us all. He uses all of us to help each other. That's how we know God is with us. James 3:17 says, the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial, and sincere. These are the things we'll see in the gestures of other people as we're ministered to, and God uses them to speak to us at any moment in our lives. Then a fourth way is this, through worship and song. Heather's glad to hear that. Through worship and song, praise brings us to a point of recognizing the presence of God. If we are attentive to the tune and words we sing, we will feel His presence. And don't tell me after having Micah and Levi and Heather and others in your lives over the years and watching how they want to lead with all their heart and the things they share from their heart as they're singing and leading us to sing and find the Lord. That is a sincere gift of God to us. And it inclines, here's something I like this. We get excitement, we get comfort, and reassurance that incline God's ear toward us to hear what we're singing to Him and our hearts. Fifth would be this. I don't have many more, don't worry, hang in there. Through His Spirit, we can know He's with us. Through His Spirit that lives in us. We are made in the image of God, and when we confess Jesus and follow Him as our Lord and Savior, His Spirit comes to live in us. You can find that in two places, actually. Paraphrase one way or the other. John 14:17 and 1 Corinthians 3:16. God speaks to us through our conscience, helping to make the right decisions. You always wonder, who's that little voice inside that's telling you, don't do this, don't go there, don't say that. And a lot of times we don't listen and we get in trouble. That same Spirit warns us to do the right thing all the time. God is with us, my friends. And that last one is simple. It's one we do all the time, I would hope. We know God's with us through prayer. In Romans 8:26 and 27, God's Word instructs us in this way. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And He who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance, I like this part, in accordance with the will of God. So He will answer your prayers in accordance to His will. You know what that means, my friends? Sometimes He's going to tell you no. Because what you ask for is not in His will. Or it's not good for you. We want God to be with us in all things, just like Joseph did. And that's the kind of people we ought to be. And I hope that sharing just a few thoughts today, His Word in Genesis 39 helps us to realize He is with us. And we can be that person of integrity that we always want to be. Keep your word. Be who you say you are at all times. Not just in church, but in private, at work. Don't get weary in well-doing. Keep on walking the talk. Because God is with you. As I conclude this morning, I'm going to share this little story of Abraham Lincoln with you. Throughout his administration, Abraham Lincoln was a president always under fire. You can see that if you read his history. Especially during the scarring, I should say, years of the Civil War. And though he knew he would make errors of office, he'd make mistakes many times, he resolved never to compromise his integrity. He's on record as saying that was important to him too. And he got the nickname Honest Abe because of that. If you know the one story where he went like 16 miles to return a few pennies, he knew somebody that overcharged them in the store. So strong was this resolve he had as president that he once said, I desire so to conduct the affairs of this administration that if at the end, when I come to lay down the reins of power, I have lost every other friend on earth. If I have lost every other friend on earth, I shall at least have one friend left, and that friend shall be down inside of me. You get that in Today in the Word, August 1989, page 21. Today in the message, my friends, I wish to encourage us all to live as people of integrity. R.J. Kidwell, my teacher I love so much, is gone now, thank the Lord. But he was a CBC, and I highly respected him. I'd go into his office as often as I could and see if he had time just to let me talk, just to hear what he had to say about anything that was on my mind. In James' class once, he looked at us all as he closed one session and basically said, integrity is being the same person in private that we can see in public. If you can do that, you will not need to cover up or lie about anything, and you will sleep pretty good too. I paraphrase this last verse, I can remember exactly how I said them. I've always remembered that, though, and I've always thought of him fondly as my modern-day Joseph. I never knew anything about him that said he didn't live a life of integrity. And when he died, there were many students and people who wanted to share, and I was one of them. There was no time for us, because too many people wanted to. But I'll tell you what, when you're gone, and your life's over, what will they say about you? The ones that are left to speak. I keenly told my family I was going to do my own, do a hologram or something, and I'd speak my own funeral. I couldn't trust them to get it right. I got to thinking that would be very self-serving, wouldn't it? And they know I'm kidding, but they also wonder just a little bit, will he? I know we'd like for people to say, I know we'd like to put in their mouths, but our life's going to tell them everything they need to know. Do you agree? Live as people of integrity, that the sun might shine through.